How you doing, guys? Today I got a different video for you. Another YouTuber who I've been really enjoying the content of. His name is Winchester. You should check him out. Link down below. He has submitted a contest where he's given the impetus of shooting a video where you go back and kind of give a brief, lengthy timeline of your life according to records and tying certain events and chapters in your life to albums that you have in your collection. And it seems I'm eager to satisfy the impetus of the conversation, if only for the entertainment, and not necessarily for the giveaway that he's doing. But either way, he is a brilliant talker about music, and you should check him out if that's the kind of thing you like. Not mostly metal whatsoever, but some here and there. So check it out if you want. But so I want to make a video. I think it should be entertaining. I think it's going to be completely candid, more candid than I've ever been in a video, I believe, talking about some of the cringiest music that I have enjoyed in my past. And I think maybe he was trying to get to that point, trying to kind of peel the layers off of who we are as music collectors now and who we present ourselves to be as music reviewers and YouTubers and nerds that collect shit tons of albums, and just kind of go back and understand other people by way of their stories and their albums. So without any further ado, day one, my parents were divorced pretty early on, age 6 or so. Before that, that's maybe one of my earliest memories, and that's one of the biggest chapters in my life, because from that point on I lived with my mother. But before that, I was just kind of fed kids music. There was a local musician named Tom Pease. Again, you'll see it's a ongoing theme here that I don't have copies of a lot of the albums I'm going to talk about, so maybe I can put up pictures in post or whatever to explain. But anyways, Tom Pease was this kids music kind of super positive, drug-free, Christian kind of musician around Iowa here, who would go to schools and perform for kids and release albums. And one of the albums that I was given as a kid was called Monsters in the Closet. And the reason I think this is an important chapter or beginning, I think, for who I am as a music fan is that while the songs were just candy, frosting, catchy, kind of acoustic folk kind of stuff, honestly, the idea of a monster in your closet freaked me out a little bit. And so as a kid, my parents were really religious, and they were really judicious about what they allowed me to consume, whether it be television, music, movies, kids I hung out with, all that 9 yards. What I wound up taking from my mother was that you fight tooth and nail to get what you want. And if it's in opposition of your parents' wishes, just all the more better to seek those pleasantries. The idea of a monster, the idea of something kind of evil, kind of spooky. To put things into perspective, I wasn't allowed to watch He-Man, Masters of the Universe, when I was a kid. Something about the witchcraft and the sorcery and the fantasy was off fucking limits for me. I remember when I had a birthday party, my grandma didn't know that I wasn't allowed to watch He-Man, but I knew that He-Man was cool, and a lot of my friends were watching He-Man, Masters of the Universe. But my grandma got me a He-Man figure with Battle Cat, and once I figured out that it was He-Man, I looked up at my parents and I smiled ear to fucking ear, because I knew that it would piss them off that I had a He-Man toy. So a lot of what illustrates, I think, who I am growing up musically, and one of the reasons I have a million albums in my collection is because I sought to oppose the restrictions that they imposed upon me as a kid. So the freedoms that I was able to find throughout the years were things that I didn't really bother to control, as you well know watching my channel. So Tom P's Monsters in the Closet was like a gateway album. Another thing though is that my mother was absolutely dirt poor when I was growing up, and we didn't have really any money. So I wasn't able to say, Mom, can we go to the store and buy me a copy of whatever. We didn't have cable television. We didn't go to movies. Once a month we would maybe rent a VCR and 2 tapes and watch them. That was my movies. Other than that, it was like a 12-inch black and white television from whatever we could pull in. But so I didn't own albums. I definitely was glued to the radio for anything that was interesting. Another thing I remember having like profound music memories with is like after we went to church on Sundays, we would go to Mazzio's Pizza out on the Strip, and a lot of family members, a lot of friends and stuff would gather around and eat pizza. But I would wander around, and I noticed that there were these tables all over the restaurant where no one was sitting there, and they would leave pocket change on the tables. And I just thought, why do people who have money forget to take their money off of the table? What's with this? I don't know. So I'm going to take this change off this table because the jukebox plays music that I like with the coins that I steal off of these tables that people forgot to take back home with them. Obviously, they were tips for waitresses and stuff. What a bastard child. But like, my parents didn't catch on to that whatsoever, that I was doing that for some reason. So I played video games in arcades and played music on jukeboxes because I was stealing change off of tables. I remember just like holding on to the jukebox at Mazzio's Pizza playing Huey fucking Lewis. To this day, today, I listened to Huey Lewis. Let me see. I got him. So like a lot of stuff I've purged out of my collection because it's like, why? But like Huey Lewis, the best of, fucking essential. Like I honestly, no irony intended. I love Huey Lewis, bar none. So like stuff like that, Starship, the hits of the day in 1984, 85, stuff like that. I was just glued to the radio. Stuff like Roxette was big to me. But then once my mother, I don't know, maybe I got an allowance or something, maybe my mom was making more income or something, but we would go to thrift stores and I would just thumb through a lot of the vinyl. Maybe it was like, maybe I'm just kind of like piecing together some of these memories that I didn't really bother to go so deep into until this video, but maybe we got a record player. That's kind of my guess, because I remember I do have my mom's record collection. She passed away a year ago. I do remember my mom playing a lot of these LPs. We got Jim Croce, Jackson 5, Simon and Garfunkel. I mean, just staple classics. My mom was really into folk music, aside from the stuff that she kind of grew up listening to, also maybe on the radio or something. But she was into this guy, John Hartford. And she played this so much that I actually remember taking a pen and drawing mustaches and glasses on every member of this band on this LP. I think it has since worn off, but she played the shit out of these John Hartford LPs, and I just hated them. And so it's funny that like they're back home in my collection now. I keep my mom's stuff like separate from my goodies, but I'm the caretaker of her vinyls nowadays. So 1987, there's a couple of albums that I remember getting in thrift stores. And once my mom was out of the room, or once she was done playing her records, I don't really feel like I grew up watching television. I was more out playing in the woods a lot by myself, only child. I remember putting on records like, it was an occasion. It was a special occasion to put on Aerosmith's Permanent Vacation. I had a copy of that on vinyl that I got at the thrift store. So, like, my first 4 vinyl LPs, to my recollection, Aerosmith, Permanent Vacation, Devo, New Traditionalists, Bootsy Collins, The One Giveth, The Count Taketh Away, and Michael Jackson's Thriller. I have a specific fond memory of going over to Grandma's house. They had cable, and I saw Michael Jackson's Thriller video. I know this is like a lot of people's of my generation. Their story is seeing the Thriller video and seeing those zombies and just thinking, holy shit. I had nightmares about those zombies for a long time. But there was a part of that fear that I felt like maybe it was some intrinsic need to defy that fear. I liked being scared of the zombies. And so I think that kind of paints who I am today. Is that like as a person, I kind of hold those things as having a power over you, and being fearful and mindful of their negative capabilities, but also kind of liking that, kind of licking the 9-volt battery, if you will. So those are my first 4 LPs. I remember in '89, we lived out here in Iowa City. I was just glued to the radio, but then I got into like taping songs off of the radio and making mixtapes for myself, and like dubbing songs from one tape to another and making like, this mix is over here, here's this kind of stuff, and here's like, I would like section off these various mixtapes for myself. We kind of lived out in the country, so I didn't have any friends whatsoever. It was just like me and a radio. Richard Marx was a big deal to me. I do remember his second album, Does It Fucking Matter? I asked for a Richard Marx album for Christmas on tape, and I got it. And on Christmas morning, my mom's then boyfriend said, "All right, Ben, put your tape in. Let's play it. Let's listen to it." And I was like, "Oh!" So embarrassing. I was so embarrassed to like share with him and my mom the secular music that I was enjoying. It's something that I had found on my own by way of radio and gotten a copy of. This is the advent where it kind of changed things for me from just like radio hits to full-on albums. I remember putting on that Richard Marx album on Christmas morning and just like wanting to cry my fucking eyes out. I don't know if I mentioned this. I was born in '79, so in '89 I would have been 10 years old. In '89 I also asked for my dad to buy me a copy of Billy Joel's Stormfront because I really loved We Didn't Start the Fire on the radio. I kind of still like this album. It's a Billy Joel. It is what it is. It's not fucking ironic. It's not a cheesy garbage record by any means. But I also got sent to church a lot more, and I was in youth groups, and like I had absolutely no connections with friends at school. I was just a loner kid, just quiet, sat in the corner by myself, just kind of occupied by my own thoughts. So I started to get kind of into more churchy kind of music, stuff like Michael W. Smith, which I actually revisited the album Eye to Eye a few hours ago, and I don't know, it's awful, but like it's not as awful as I maybe expected it to be going back on it. But then again, like my fucking palate is just wrecked, as you'll see going through this video. So like Michael W. Smith was a big thing, and like another thing about that is like your pastor will just fucking feed you Christian tapes of that kind of music all day long to keep you coming back. So like of course I want free tapes. I'm not getting music from anywhere else because we were dirt fucking poor. I remember, to illustrate how fucking poor we were, my mom sat me down one day and she said, "Ben, your 50-cent allowance is too much for me to handle. We're gonna need to reduce it down to 35 cents a week." And I said, "Mom, just keep it. Don't worry about it. We'll revisit this allowance maybe in a couple of years or so. I know if you have to take 15 cents off of my allowance, you need more than just 15 cents a week. So like, I seriously, I can't imagine being that fucking poor. So that's like 89, 90. I moved down to my dad's back in Burlington. I'm glued to like MTV, all the stuff that was going on back around then, like Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise. I was just watching MTV all day long. And then it wasn't until I got into high school, my freshman year, stuff like Dr. Dre's The Chronic came out, and Eric Swearick sold me a copy of his cassette of The Chronic for 50 cents. And like, to just defy everything your parents wanted you to be enjoying, and as a kid, that is a fucking vile beast of a fun album. My God, The Chronic. And then I remember, so that like, at that point, everything that I was listening to was kind of old because of like thrift stores. Couldn't afford buying like new records at that point. Like, I feel like a lot of you younger kids, like, this might just be blowing your mind. It might sound like old men rambling on the fucking porch. But seriously, like, imagine like being so disconnected from all modern music that you don't get to even hear or own an album until it's been out for 2 or 3 years, because that's when you're likely to see it in a used bin at Salvation Army for $2.38. So another memory I have is that, I guess this is kind of rewinding a couple of years. I remember specifically this kid was talking to me about New Kids on the Block. They were fucking hot. The hottest thing in 1990 with all my kids who were about 10, 11 years old in my grade. I heard about it. I was like, yeah, I think I heard that song on the radio. Pretty good, whatever. But all of a sudden, like in my school, New Kids on the Block were no longer cool. One day they just fucking got canceled hard. So I was able to buy a copy of their Hangin' Tough album for 50 cents from this kid. And I took it home and I listened to it on my Walkman non-stop for one weekend. And I so enjoyed being able to like dig into a full album that wasn't just a one-off hit or a mixtape of a bunch of radio hits. So Hangin' Tough, I listened to it as an album through and through that whole weekend. And then Monday came and the kid on the bus who sold me the tape said, "Hey, how'd you like that New Kids on the Block tape?" I told him it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I listened to it all weekend. And he goes, "Fucking f-." So I decked him. I punched him right square in the face, threw him out into the aisle on the floor. And the bus driver pulled over the bus and said, "Well, get back in your seat. You deserved it. Problem solved." Dude, bus driver stood up for me. That's kind of like an Otto Simpsons kind of moment. But all over New Kids on the Block. What a stupid fucking story. So high school, 93, I'm freshman. I remember specifically seeing this girl sitting behind me in social studies class, and she had a copy of Snoop Doggy Dogg's Doggy Style on cassette. And I had been curious about this. I knew he was the guy who rapped with Dr. Dre on The Chronic, and this was his first solo album, and I think I had been hearing some of his hits from that record on the radio. I was, again, still glued to the radio, listening to fucking Snow and Former and SWV and all that trash that was going on around that time period. But the idea of this girl, maybe she was more likely to be going to the mall or something than I was. I didn't have a chance to go to the mall. My mom wouldn't take me to the mall. So like the idea, I thought, like, I do want this Doggy Style album. I started to piece it together in my mind. I could save up $12 and I could ride my bike to the mall, which would probably have been back then about 8 miles or so, which is quite a bike ride for my fat ass at that time. So I do remember saving up for a couple of weeks to get about $12 together so I could ride my bike to the mall and get a copy of Doggy Style, because I knew my mom wouldn't let me at that point. So I did it. It felt so fucking good to be so rebellious with this album. It was fucking vile, dirty, funky, catchy, and just fun. It's just so, it honestly, for a 14-year-old kid at that age, it's fucking vile. It's so, just, what's the word I'm looking for? Rebellious, I guess. Honestly, I'm sticking with that word. So Snoop Doggy Dogg. So then Christmas rolls around. Maybe it's 94 or something, and I ask for a CD player and a couple of CDs for Christmas. I was like, let's just shoot for the fucking what do you call it? Shoot for the outfield walls. So my dad actually followed through. He got my grandma and my now stepmother to put together and get me a CD player and a couple of CDs. And what I asked for was just like shit that I knew that they could find at Walmart, because we didn't have music stores where I lived at that time. So I asked for Green Day, Dookie, Stone Temple Pilots, Purple, Nirvana, Nevermind, who I love from the radio, and maybe Pearl Jam's Vitalogy at that point. So I'm starting to piece together a kind of a collection of CDs and listening to them nonstop. I really liked Pearl Jam's second album, Vitalogy. It's, I don't know, it's catchy, it's fun, it rocks, it's kind of dark a little bit. But this stuff is, it kind of shows a diverse palette at this point, I think. Especially, like, I was looking at like the first four, the Bootsy Collins, Devo, Michael Jackson, and Aerosmith. It's kind of like a weird hodgepodgey mishmash. It's not just like Kiss, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Def Leppard, and Metallica or shit like that, you know. I had a weird upbringing to wind up being a fucking black and death metal nerd by any means. So my sophomore year, I got more into Rage Against the Machine. I heard some Metallica on the radio that I taped, and I kind of liked it. I don't fuck with Metallica at all right now. But I remember coming to a point where I would listen to maybe the angriest songs that I could find on the albums that I liked, whether it was Stone Temple Pilots or Rage Against the Machine, that first one, and I would listen to it on headphones at the loudest volume I possibly could. I wanted it to hurt. I wanted it to just be as extreme as I could possibly figure out how to listen to music in that way. And I always tie that memory with the satisfaction that I found when I first heard metal. So I'm 16. The day after my 16th birthday, I was hired at Sunmart Foods bagging groceries, and I met this kid named Kelly, who to this day is still a friend of mine. And one day, Kelly and I, for work, we have to, like, my main job at that point was sorting recycled cans and bottles, and there were some cans and bottles that our distributor wouldn't take back from us. So what we would do is drive all those cans and bottles to a neighboring rival grocery store and unload them off on them. So there was like a chance for us 16-year-old kids to hop in the car and go to the other grocery store and unload a bunch of bottles and cans and stuff on them. So that moment, Kelly was playing Fear Factory's Demanufacture to me, and it fucking awakened a beast in me that to this day is who I am. I don't own a copy of Fear Factory's Demanufacture. I actually revisited it. In fact, I want to say I might have even just flat out played it and then got rid of it. That album, for some reason, for as instrumental and just a cornerstone of me as a metalhead as it was, I cannot fucking stand Demanufacture to this day. Some of the other metal records that I wound up listening to with Kelly, I still love, but for some reason Demanufacture by Fear Factory is just an utter fucking pile of trash. I swear to you. So I started hanging out with Kelly, working together and hanging out, and we were just fucking best friends because he had the connection to the metal. He played in a metal band. He had a car. I didn't have a car until I was a senior in high school. So that was my first chance to smoke cigarettes, listen to metal, drive around town, drink Surge. I was like I just felt like I had finally been lifted free from the mediocre, constrictive childhood that I had suffered. Yeah, not to like rag on my mom whatsoever. It ain't easy growing up in Iowa as a single mom raising a kid. So other albums that Kelly played for me, I'll show you finally some physical copies, were Heartwork by Carcass. Absolutely crushing record. It's angry, it's also like beautifully composed, it's melodic. It sounds so, I'm not sure how to really put it, like for someone who had just been listening to stuff like Stone Temple Pilots, that stuff seems so immediate, so off the cuff, so just devoid of really any depth. Stuff like Rage Against the Machine, sure, it's visceral and it's angry and it's got just kind of like minimal elements of other bands that you already know. It just kind of tweaks the knob a little bit further to the right for you. But stuff like Heartwork by Carcass, it's just fucking mind-blowingly brilliant. And then stuff like Slaughter of the Soul by At the Gates. This fucking rages, and it also introduces this ornate and just composed melodicism to it. That was something I hadn't really heard before. Twin guitar harmonies played with just aggression, screaming. That's another thing. Like the vocals in these metal albums that I was listening to was just completely different from anything I'd ever heard before. Zach De La Rocha in Rage Against the Machine does kind of scream, but in metal, as opposed to a lot of that other previous kind of stuff, you really take on a metaphorical kind of beast of a human being. You're exemplifying your emotions in such a inhuman way, and that's another element I think that draws me toward metal in such a way. It's like you get to not be a human being by the more you immerse yourself in metal, whether you're playing it or listening to it, you get to step away from being a human being, which is boring, mundane suffering. So that just fucking rearranges everything in my life. I gotta have it. I need it. I dubbed tapes of everything I could get Kelly to dub me a tape of. It was hard to not be really annoying to him. Hard to imagine me being annoying. Because I wanted everything he had. He had fucking Samuel. He had maybe 150 CDs, and a lot of them were metal. And he played in a fucking band. When I listened to Nirvana back when I was 13 or 14, I wanted so bad to be the singer and guitar player in a band that just screamed and wailed and was fun and loud and just angry. So like I was kind of jealous of that. In fact, I should show you a copy of Kelly's band. So Kelly played bass and vocals in this band called Sanguis, and their demo was called The Pain of Being. And they played shows around town, strangely enough, and I wound up being really good friends to this day with the guitar player. Not much to see here, this is just Copyworks. But it was melodic, it's still kind of fun. It's kind of like beefy, kind of ham-fisted kind of black metal. It's not black like you'd think, but yeah. I loved their logo. I don't know if it'll focus. Yeah, I love that thing. I was just so impressed by black metal at that point. So that gets us into really the next chapter of my obsession. Albums like, now we're talking 96, 97, my senior year in high school, I just didn't give... Okay, actually, let's rewind for a minute. I am stepping over an important chapter. I have some notes here that I'm kind of referencing, but it's hard to stick to them. Before all the metal, my sophomore year, I was actually kind of tired of being angry with a lot of that Stone Temple Pilots, Rage Against the Machine, a lot of the indie rock kind of. So getting bored with that stuff, I turned to Wu-Tang. I don't even know where I first heard Wu-Tang's Enter the 36 Chambers. It could have been like in the back of a Hit Parade or magazine or something that I saw something. I don't know how I first heard Wu-Tang, but Enter the 36 Chambers just pretty much made me go, okay, fuck everything else, this is all I listen to now. And all the solo albums that those guys put out, all the soundtracks that they had songs on, from Ghostface Killah, Old Dirty Bastard, a little bit of the Cypress Hill kind of stuff, but I was just like, alright, I'm getting rid of all my CDs, all my LPs, all I need right now is Wu-Tang. So like that was my main thing until I heard metal. I had a Wu-Tang shirt for every single day of the week in high school in 96. But once metal happened, it was like, okay, fuck all this, on to the next thing. And you'll kind of start to understand that like, that happens at certain points throughout my fandom. So back to 97 here. Cradle of Filth, Dusk and Her Embrace. I was thinking the other day, actually, I'm so thankful that my gateway to metal Cradle of Filth album wasn't any of the later albums, but it seems like Cradle of Filth is such a gateway band for a lot of people. Come on! There you are. Y'all know this cover, but this is so theatrical and just... It's got so much depth to it. Compared to everything else there was out there at this time. This absolutely just blew me away. Like, I honestly can't believe, like, going back to those days, playing something like this, or even Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk. Play that for a 17-year-old kid back in the late 90s. Holy shit. It's just insanely orchestral, super well composed. It's one of the most foreign and just alien things I had ever heard to that point. And it was beautiful, and it was aggressive and dark, angry. That's another thing, like, at this point I was probably at the height of my rage as a teenager with Christianity. I had been raised on it throughout most of my childhood, and I saw nothing good come of it for that entire time. And that was when, another thing, Kelly was the first atheist who I had met, and his parents were kind of the same way, raising him religiously, and he just completely defied it all the way. I saw that and I was like, that's me, I gotta do that, I need that, oh boy. So Kelly just really kind of took me out of who I didn't want to be and showed me the path to being who I wanted to be, and I give him all the credit for that. So Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk, big mind blower for me. Cradle of Filth, Dusk and Her Embrace, but also Abigor's Opus 4. This kind of worked on the same level as these other two albums did in that regard. And then to Sweden, Nagelfar's Vitra. Still love this record to this day. Super well written songs. This to me just steps outside of the Swedish black metal or death metal template, and it has a lot of depth to it, honestly. This stuff right here is just so light years different from your Fear Factories and your Carcasses. Those are just so much more visceral, black and white and plain, and sometimes I want that, but I leapt so hard from the brutal, fast, visceral death metal to this more fancy, more just well composed and thoughtful music that black metal was. So black metal was just my entire fucking life. Once I got out of high school, I was like, finally I can fucking focus on black fucking metal all the time. Fuck everything else. Fuck my job. I lived with my mom, and she just started to pay or charge me $200 a month rent for the bedroom in the motorhome that I was living in, and I would fucking probably every other month completely blow her off and just be like, nope, sorry mom, I blew my entire paycheck on a bunch of fucking black metal CDs. Sorry. Did it so regularly. I still have those gems in my collection because I just fucked off rent with my mom when I was living with her. I'm a fucking bastard. What can I say? So those albums just like rearrange my fucking face. So next phase, I guess, that I leapt towards was actually creating and playing music with the guitar player from Sanguis, Ron, who we ran a label together for a while. We still correspond regularly, but he had started, actually I should have pulled this out first too. He had been recording an album with some other friends of mine, friends of Kelly's. This band is Erasmus. This demo is called Forged for Proof Etern. And so Ron had just got done recording these guys, and his reaction to the recording process was, I am so fucking tired of teenagers trying to be so fucking cult and black metal and true and whatever, that I'm gonna make an album that mocks black metal in its entirety. And so that was what the first Satan's Almighty Penis album was. He just did that on his own. But for some reason he did it instrumental black metal. He was like, this is funny, this is fun, it's just an outlet for just a feeling that I'm having for the day. But he didn't put vocals on it for some reason. So I heard it, he played it for me, and I was like, this is fucking great, dude. I've always wanted to be a vocalist in a band. I wondered if you would think about letting me sing on your songs. Should we give it a shot? This is 1999 or so. So in that 3-year period from 97 to 2000 or so, I just amassed tons of albums. I was in college for about a year. I keep rewinding here because I'm forgetting elements. When I got out of high school, I enjoyed that summer with my new metalhead friends. That was just like the metal summer in my life. But after that happened, my mom moved out of the house because I didn't move out of the house. So I took on the mortgage. I had to work 2 jobs, and I was in college. And I had to pick up a roommate to be able to afford to live there. Things fell apart. How the fuck can you handle full-time school and pay mortgage with 2 fucking jobs on a house? She really fucking left me high and dry there, and that became a huge rift between my mom and I at that time. So metal took a back seat. I was working constantly, burning myself out, and then about 8 months later, my mom showed up on our couch, unexpected. She wanted to move back in, and that was when I was like, all right, fuck this, I'm moving out. You didn't need to do anything. All you had to do was ask. So I moved out on my own, and that was when the collecting like really started to take form. But at that point, it's worth saying to a lot of people who may not understand this distinction, up until a certain point, collecting wasn't such a frivolous endeavor, because up until the internet, you had to have a copy of an album in order to listen to it. So a lot of my collection is stuff that I bought just so I could listen to it, because I didn't have any other way of discovering new stuff or listening to it without going over to friends' houses or dubbing tapes and shit like that. So I guess maybe it could be said that when the internet started and you could hear everything and have everything to be listened to at the ready, you don't really need to own a physical copy of an album. But that was when I was able to discover a ton of new stuff, and hence I kept buying tons and tons and tons of new stuff. So 99, I joined Satan's Almighty Penis as the vocalist. I'm downloading fucking records left and right on Napster, leaving my phone off the hook 24/7 so I can download an album. Back then, an album took about maybe 3 hours to download the MP3s of it. I'm on AOL chatting with friends, chatted with like Neil from Krieg, Julian from Cult of Azazel. I got to know people like Herva from Antaeus. Another big chapter was in college when I was in there for a minute, is I wouldn't go to any of my fucking classes. I sat in the library and got on the internet, because that was my only access to the internet, and the internet was new at that point, and I was on the blackmetal.com chat room for 7-8 hours a day talking to People like Trim from Emperor were in there. I remember talking to Hellhammer for a while in there. Ben Falgoust from Soylent Green was a frequenter of that chat room. Shout out to anybody who remembers the blackmetal.com chat room. So yeah, collecting was just started getting rampant. I started singing in Satan's Almighty Penis, and now, so my friend Ron and I at that point just started sharing albums back and forth because we're downloading as much stuff as we possibly can. So like I'm taking stuff in through friends that I'm meeting on the internet. I'm taking stuff in through Ron, who is about 10 years older than me. And so I'm also like learning about his collection and all the stuff that he's into. That was a huge influence on a lot of stuff that I wound up loving. I guess another couple of albums around those burgeoning periods was Dawn's debut, Ner Solen Gar Neighbor for Evoger, The Sunset Forever, or Sork Pas Svarte Vingar Flow. Dawn was amazing. So we'll fast forward a couple more years. Ron and I started a label. In the beginning, it was called BlackMetalDVDs.com, and all we did was we tape traded VHS tapes with traders all over the world, and we ripped those VHS tapes to DVD and sold the DVD-Rs to people for about $10. It got to the point where we started getting official permission from bands to put those videos out, because we didn't want to be just like total bootleggers. It started out as a bootleg thing, but so we got permission from all the bands up into a point. We had like fucking Satyricon, Niflheim, Watain, lots of great stuff, and I can't believe back in that day so many bands were accessible via email. We're talking like 2002, 3, and that they would give permission to some dorks in Iowa to sell permissible bootlegs, DVD-Rs of shows that they had played. But so that really got us entrenched in the black metal scene internationally. We would trade these DVD-Rs with other labels out in fucking Ukraine. Lido Takas was the label we traded with. That just fucking blew open our contact with lots of other little scenes and areas, Scandinavia, Germany, South America, you name it. He would trade with anybody and get just tons of weird stuff in, and that has so much to do with so much of my illustrious taste and collection and stuff that I'm into. That just was a huge connection. But around that time period too, I started working at a call center for Farmers Insurance, and I met these kids who didn't play metal, and they played like emo, basement shows, DIY, rock and roll, punk rock kind of stuff. And so that was the first time I had actually stepped back from metal to a point. 2000 to 2003, let's just say. So I started hanging out with these kids, going to their shows, going to see their bands play in basements, and I made a lot of friends that way. We went on tour throughout the Midwest with Brazil. I don't have copies of this stuff around here. I'm having more fun just talking rather than like showing albums. So I know this wasn't necessarily the intent of the whole thing, but I learned about DIY music, basement dwelling, Iowan, Midwestern, punk rock kind of stuff. The punk stuff I didn't really ever like, but they got me interested in some emo, some indie rock, and some kind of alternative other kinds of stuff, which I didn't know I needed at that point. I was just nothing but black and death metal for 5 years straight. I needed a break. And so I had some friends who introduced me to stuff like Modest Mouse, Lonesome as a Crowded West, Aphex Twin, Come to Daddy, First Fantomas. I started working at a record store part-time. These kids would hang out there too, at the drive-in, Acrobatic Tenement. So that just really blew open the doors on a lot of other kind of stuff that I got interested in. Naked City, self-titled, John Zorn and Mike Patton were, big deals around all that kind of stuff. So like that just blew me out into a lot of like experimental kind of stuff and avant-garde, non-metal kind of shit. Um, Also met some friends who were into like some insurgent country kind of stuff. We got Split Lip Rayfield, Devil in a Woodpile, some of my favorite stuff. Country music we'll get back to a little bit further on. This is longer than I intended it to be. I'm sorry. David's video was somehow super efficient, entertaining, and quick. Mine will not be that. So I started making my own music as a solo project under the name of Clean Mountain, and that was experimenting with all these different influences and just kind of playing around with sampling music. I also did some solo work on an album called Ass Crispy, which we won't talk about. But Clean Mountain, to this day, I did that album in 2003. That's probably the thing I'm most proud of as an artist. I was a drawer. I was a photographer. I did a lot of creative stuff in high school and throughout the years, and I kind of hate everything I do. Of course, to be fucking obvious artist kind of guy, but I did. But Clean Mountain is something that to this day I think that is really, really good. If you want to check it out, I have a Bandcamp page with a couple of my other projects on there. You're welcome to it. bensmasher.bandcamp.com, I believe. I'll put it down below. Anyway, so weird music takes over, and I'm into weird music and metal at the same time, and just there's no way of like tracing down all these paths for you at all. But other important milestone albums throughout this timeline. So with the label, we move out of the DVDs and into releasing music. We put out some stuff. Nijikata, War Plague, Old Goat. I probably could have pulled out some of those things, but you can go to paganflames.com. We changed the name from Black Metal DVDs to Pagan Flames around 2006 or something like that. And it wasn't until 2007 or 8 we signed Panopticon. And I got to be friends with him by way of that. So we released a couple of his albums on Pagan Flames, and it went well. Everything was great. I don't think we ever intended for any of our artists to have any success whatsoever. We wanted to release the weirdest, grimmest, underground, just black metal bullshit we possibly could. But I think we started to kind of take a turn with stuff, and we wanted to start releasing stuff that was more pagan, more nature inspired, less of your typical monochromatic black and white kind of stuff. And so Panopticon fit that bill very well. But so we released Kentucky. Davis also kind of made a chapter about this album. So there's the Pagan Flames logo on the OG press of Kentucky. We released this, and I got to help Austin move out of Kentucky. This is kind of his farewell love letter to the state of Kentucky, and it has a lot to do also with coal mining. And this was the first time that I had really taken the content of an album that I loved, who was made by a friend of mine, coincidentally, and really took it for face value. And really started to understand what union labor was about, and how this mountaintop removal was so fucking disgusting. And this is I think a big turning point for a lot of people who were black metal fans, where they were listening to metal for its content that was actually relevant and wasn't a metaphor for some emotions. And so this is a big turning point for a lot of people. So I got to be friends with Austin. I helped him move out of Kentucky. Minnesota is a lot closer where he lives now to me than he was in Kentucky, so I would go up there for a couple of years every other weekend or so and stay for 2 or 3 days a week at a time if work could let me take vacation or so. And we got to be really close, and that really just also blew up my connection and interest with a lot of other bands. And so forth. So that was a real strong friendship, another huge chapter in me getting into tons of more music. Now that leads us to starting a YouTube channel. It's probably been 3 or 4 years now. I can't even remember. Marty from Bindaroon Recordings messaged me, and I think at this point Panopticon had switched over from Pagan Flames to Bindaroon. And Marty and I were talking. I don't think we had met at this point, but we talked pretty regularly, and he said, you know what, I've been watching these guys on YouTube, and they talk about records, and I can't stop watching it. I think you should check it out. So I checked it out, and I was like, bunch of fucking dweebs. I'm not entertained. Not into it. Marty kept badgering me, and badgering me, and badgering me, and I kept watching these dweebs talk about records, and I just got so fucking frustrated with what they were doing. I got frustrated with how these were the ambassadors of my lifestyle, and I couldn't let that stand. And so I decided to try it out, and here we are today doing this thing. So doing YouTube really opened up a lot of other avenues and interests in my musical collecting. It definitely, my collection has probably doubled since I started doing YouTube. I'm afraid to admit that. Also, in the last couple of years, I met my partner, and we're both into music. She's not necessarily all that into metal. She was a little bit first into some of your Dark Thrones and your Burzums and stuff like that, but she was well more aware of the political side of those things than I was at that time. So it wasn't like she got as into it as I did. But we together really started to enjoy and explore, well, for lack of a better term, and I kind of hate this, but world music. World music basically just means anything that isn't from America or Europe. And that really opened up a lot of new interests. I should have had these pulled out too, so I'm sorry, but the thing is, I try and keep my collection strictly metal. I have a few exceptions, but this is folk and pop sounds of Sumatra. There's this label called Sublime Frequencies, and they put together these compilations of world music, and they're just fucking fantastic. I love quite a few of them. Sometimes some of them are just like an hour of the radio in Thailand in 1968. Other ones are more like accurately curated, like guitar music of Zimbabwe or stuff like that. It's fascinating. One of the things that like really sold me on this world music with my new partner Jillian at the time was she found something on Soulseek. It was like 300 tracks of some of the oldest recordings of Chinese opera. And back then, all opera was performed by men, even in the women's roles. And so some of that opera is men trying to sing a higher register, and it just sounds absolutely ridiculous. It sounds dusty and old and just archaic as all hell. It's some of the weirdest, most foreign sounding music to me at that time. I've come to have an interest in starting to learn more about the culture that is a part of that music and not just consume it as a pedestrian. And that has really had a lot to do with me taking in a lot more influences from outside of my horizons here as an American. We got to travel to Europe a couple of years ago together, and that has just really been a satisfying new chapter, because that was the most recent change in my listening habits. I listen to quite a bit of weird, strange compilations of different kinds of world music from all over the place a lot of the time. I say this in some of my videos, but it's maybe worth mentioning it. I would say I probably listen to metal half the time and everything else the other half the time, just to give you an idea. So like, I usually choose not to talk about any other like non-metal stuff on my channel, because I don't want to, I want to keep it maybe as single-minded as possible. I think that's why you guys are all here, for the metal. So I can't imagine a lot of you guys are interested in much of that other stuff, but maybe at some point I'll put together like a mix or compilation of a lot of the world music kind of stuff that I'm into. Like I said, I don't buy copies of that stuff. I usually buy stuff on Bandcamp if it's that, or I try and find CD copies of it. But for the limited space that I have here, I've had to just basically cull everything that isn't metal exclusively out of here. There's one other I think I should be able to find. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I may have let somebody borrow it actually. It's Music of the Not Poi from Thailand, but I would really like to travel down to Thailand and just kind of understand more about their culture down there. Another recent discovery was I found this documentary on YouTube about Japanese gagaku music, which is some of the earliest recorded funeral music. Not recorded. Well, recorded by way of writing down paper, not recordings of music. But they have a tradition of a funeral procession performance where there's masks and outfits and these really strange instruments. I'll put a link down below. I urge you to check it out. It's one of the most fascinating things I've seen in the last few years. It's dark. It's so just otherworldly. It's some of the most interesting music I've heard in maybe the last 10 years or so. So I'm gonna cut it short. Long ass video. It's like I said, it's not really for the purpose of winning an LP that Davis is giving away. I just wanted to make something kind of interesting for once. Thanks for watching. Film a video and enter the contest if you wish to do so. We'll see you next time. Thank you.